He is one of the most outstanding assembly people in the country, not just in our Coachella Valley or in California, but in the US of A. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the Honorable Assemblyman Eduardo Garcia.
Good afternoon, Democrats. Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you for the warm welcome as we walked in. I actually felt like a real politician shaking everybody's hand going around in circles. You know? I'm happy to be here with you all. I can't tell you how important this gathering is for what's to come in a few days. June 5th is an extremely important election for us here locally, and I think it's going to set the tone for what happens in November. And I want to just highlight a little bit about the race that is of extreme importance on June 5th, and that's former Assemblymember Manuel Perez on the ballot for County Board of Supervisors. I can tell you how important it is that we get every single Democrat, and quite frankly, he's been able to attract across the aisle appeal to make sure that he gets elected. But I cannot emphasize enough how important that is to setting the tone in this area to what happens in November. And let me tell you why. So the numbers in this county continue to grow in favor of Democrats. We see it based on the efforts of you all here, organizing, registering people to vote, the new system to register more people to vote efficiently. The question now becomes, how do we get them out to the polls? We've spent a lot of time, on our efforts to register people to vote, but we got to get people out to the polls. And so the county seat for us, I think, is going to be the test. If we can get Democrats to the polls in June. If we can get them out to the polls in June, there's no reason why they're not going to come out in November. And in November, we have the opportunity to pick up a number of different seats in this region, starting, of course, with Ms. Manzingo, and of course, starting with Joyce Silver in the Senate side, right? There's an opportunity. The numbers make sense. The numbers are not far-fetched as it relates to everything that's going on nationally. The push here in California, not just to be the front or the resistance to the Trump administration, but to really fight and champion on issues that are extremely important. We highlighted the issue of gun safety laws. There isn't one gun safety law, and I'm proud to say this, that I have not supported since it's come before me, because it's the right thing to do, and because there are far too many guns. There are far too many guns in comparison to people. Way too many guns in comparison to people. And I get criticized for that, and I will get, beat up on that a little bit. But you know what? I have children. I see what's happening across the country, all of these tragic incidents, and it is just heartfelt, right? To be one of those parents on the other side who's getting the phone call and say that there was another mass shooting at a school, and be wondering, right, if that was your child who was the next victim. And so that's the reason why we support these laws. I believe that if you want to get a gun and you go through a process, and even if the process gets a little more complicated or difficult, it costs a little more, you have the right to own a gun and go through the process and get it. But the fact of the matter is that there's way too many guns on the streets, and unfortunately too many bad people are getting their hands on them. So thank you for raising that, because that's an extremely important issue for us. Right here in the Coachella Valley, we have a tremendous amount of opportunity to continue to build the democratic operation here, to make sure that not only we're electing people statewide, but at the local government level. And again, I'm going to go back to this June 5th election. That is going to be a huge telling moment for Democrats in this region, because I'll tell you that on June 8th, the California GOP is holding a huge gathering in Indio, California. They're holding a huge gathering, and I think there's 100,000 contribution level, 50,000 contribution level, 25,000 contribution level. And they're beginning to look at this area and see that there's maybe a window of opportunity to not only beat Manny Perez in the County Board of Supervisors, but then target our congressman, then target myself, and then continue to rebuild their Republican operators here in the Coachella Valley. And that's what the history of this region tells us, right? right. This was a very strong Republican-secured area for California, and you all helped turn that around, but we're not done with those efforts to continue to build on that. Look, I'm running for my third term. We have been extremely productive in the last 2 years that we've been I've been working on little issues, medium-sized issues, big issues, all of them extremely important to our region, important to California, important to the country. I mean, we have had the opportunity to work on issues related to climate change, and I get critiqued every now and then by stakeholders and interest-based groups out here that say, why are you working on climate change issues? Why does that matter? Right? How is that creating jobs in our community? How is that bringing resources to our community? And I can point to very tangible things, right? The renewable energy industry is strong in the Coachella Valley, and that's because of the climate change efforts of the state of California. We see a tremendous amount of opportunity to continue to bring dollars to the area, to build open spaces and trees, to sequester carbon in the area, and not only address our park deficiency needs in the area. And we can point to areas where we've seen some progress in the area. We also see an opportunity to bring the dollars for housing via the cap and trade, climate change policies, the transit-oriented tech development, and we're positioning closely to the organizations that are here locally to be able to build that type of development. And there's millions and millions of dollars available that we're going to be able to capture. And so that's why I'm working on climate change issues. I tell people, not only because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the real thing right before us to be able to access those dollars to bring back to the district. Now, a lot of people are saying, there's a lot of road construction going on. There's a lot of roads being improved, and you know quite well that it was very controversial, very difficult decision for us to make, but investing in our infrastructure and taking a vote on an issue of raising the gas to 12 cents that's going to come back to our community was not an easy issue for me. It was not an easy issue because we recognize that those who least to pay most of the times are the ones that are going to be taking the brunt of the hit on that. But the fact of the matter is that the return on the investment in improving our infrastructure and our roads, I think, pays off 3 or 4 times the 12 cents that we're paying and that we've secured to be able to bring to our district. You can't drive around an area of town where you won't see, caution, there's road construction ahead, and that's one of the things that we were very adamant about making sure that money got back to our area. So that's moving ahead. But I'll tell you that that's going to be an issue that the GOP uses up and down the state of California. Not so much just to talk about it, but that's what they're banking on to get their voters out to the polls, all the way from the gubernatorial race down to the local races. They're going to be talking about that. And so I wanted to share with you all that, in California, we are committed to continuing to push the agenda on all of the issues that the federal government is kicking out of the priorities that were accomplished by the previous administration. Yes, we're going to continue to fight. We're going to fight hard, and we're going to support, our Democratic delegation in Washington, D.C. to make sure that, we elevate the voice of the 5th largest economy in the world, that's the state of California. Yes. We often get critique, right, that California is not a place to do business, that California is losing people to Florida and to Texas, and I can tell you that those are all just myths and arguments that are made by others, that the fact of the matter is we don't go from the 8th largest economy in the world to 5th by people leaving the state of California and jobs and businesses leaving it. That doesn't happen that way, right? It just doesn't, the dots just don't connect, right? So, we continue to see progress in California, but let me just state that, not all areas of California are seeing that same prosperity, right? And I'm conscious of that. And some of those areas are areas in my district. And so now, for me, that means that I have to be a louder voice in Sacramento. I have to be a louder voice in Sacramento to make sure that when we're promoting these policies, when we're saying this is what's happening in California, that we're actually bringing everyone along. We're making some strides. We're making some strides in the areas like in Imperial County and the Central Valleys, where unemployment historically is in the 20-some percentile, where we've kind of chopped that in half, right? Where it's been chopped in half, and we've got to continue to see that happen. But it's through the policies that are intentional that says, hey, we need to make sure that these policies give those regions of the state just a little tiny more of a boost, right? That's what we call equity. right? Making sure that there's equitable distribution of the prosperity of the state of California. And I recognize that that's one of my main priorities as I'm in the state of California. I want to touch on three things that are local, that are connected to the state, and that are extremely important. One is the Salton Sea. Let me just tell you that I was extremely active in what is known today as Prop 68. That came via a piece of legislation that was written by myself and Senator Kevin De Leon. And what that proposal does is that it's a $4 billion water park and climate resiliency infrastructure bond for the state of California, Prop 68. And you better believe that as the author of that measure, we were going to make sure that our region, that our district was taken care of. There's no question about that. And so in that measure, Prop 68, there are $200 million going towards the mitigation of the management plan at the Salton Sea. That is the largest amount that would have ever come from the state of California. And the proposition is polling at the mid-50s, 56%, so we're confident that that's going to happen. On top of that, there's another $200 million that we are eligible for, which would then mean that there's $400 million potentially there to cover the entire cost of what is that 10-year management plan that was rolled out last year during the month of April. So there's efforts that are underway that are focused on two things on the Salton Sea. One is to mitigate the air quality impacts of a drying up sea, and the other is to protect the ecosystem out there that 400 plus birds depend on, as it is in the Pacific Flyway. You all know that. But for us, the most important thing is that we're finally seeing some action. So when people say nothing's going to happen, nothing's ever happened, that's wrong. It's happening. It's going to continue to happen. And one of the reasons why I think it's extremely important that we put someone like Ms. Manzingo and Mrs. Joyce over at the state capitol is because, in a situation like the one we were in last year, where we were able to negotiate $200 million, having a little more local support from the regional area means that we maybe could have got $300 or $400 million. Two other people pushing in that direction. And so I wanted just to highlight that. The other point that I wanted to make is that we want to continue to increase our investment in our K-12 educational system. That is extremely important. And so this year, in the budget that the governor put out in May, he's actually increased the per student spending almost to about $16,000. Just about 4 years ago, we were at $8,000 per student. At the bottom of the barrel as it relates to the country in terms of how much we're investing in students. And I believe that we need to continue to do more, but we're moving in the right direction. And that ties into the level of economic development and investment that we're able to attract to the region, whether it means diversifying our economies, perhaps into some kind of tech areas, diversifying the economy into some kind of manufacturing that we put forward to manufacturing incentives as a result of last year's cap and trade deal, where now there are incentives for bigger manufacturing to come to the state of California. But we have to have a skilled workforce. And to invest in our K-12 system, specifically in our career tech education, is one of the things that is extremely important and a top priority. $500 million are being proposed to go into the CTE programs up and down the state of California to make sure that young people are not wanting to go on to higher education, we're actually offering them some viable options and opportunities to people working in We want to go back to a day where we're making things, we're building things, we're made in California, right, at the highest, labor standards, at the highest environmental quality standards, right, and making sure that people know that, good things come out of California when it comes to manufacturing. So that's the second point that I wanted to make. The third and final point, we know that there is a huge housing crisis in the state of California. We know that there are a lot of people, and it was just spoken about, a lot of people on the streets, but the problem isn't just kind of, one silver bullet that's going to take the problem. So we are really focused this year at the California legislative level to focus on the housing of our homelessness, our veterans, our single mothers, folks who are coming through that end up just under a bad situation and ultimately end up on the streets. We are looking at it comprehensively. So we're also looking at the mental health investments that the state of California are making so that we can approach this housing crisis, not just this affordability issue, but the housing crisis that's affecting everyday Californians, right, to a point where we're now recognizing that the face of homelessness is a completely different one. The way we can envision and think about who was homeless, 5, 10, 15 years ago is a very different one. children and mothers and families who are living out of their vehicles. And so investing in housing in California and trying to create policies that are going to make it easier to build homes is one of the things that we're emphasizing. And the governor and his mayor revise also gave us a nice little bump to make sure that we can kickstart some of these housing programs as it relates to making sure that people have access to affordable and attainable housing. So I just want to cover those 3 areas that are alive and well, moving in the California legislature. As you know, I've been doing this for a little while. This is my 14th year in public service. 14th year in public service. Funny story, I was telling the story the other day. We started as one of the youngest guys on the city council. 2 years later, I became one of the oldest guys. There were 2 young guys that got elected at 23. So I went in as the youngest, I was 27. 2 years later, I was the oldest guy. The reason why I highlight that is that because, even though we've been doing this for 14 years, I have more energy now than I did 14 years ago. And I feel extremely honored and extremely privileged to be able to serve in this capacity. And I just want to close with this. We do have an election. We do have some opponents. The Republicans in California are looking at our area as a place that they can slowly begin to turn around and take back control of. That's why they're having this big event in Indio. That's why they're having this big event in Indio. And so they're wanting to send us a message, right? That they're not going to give us a free ride. And we recognize that, and we've never taken that for granted. We've never taken that for granted, whether we had a weak opponent, a big opponent, a small opponent. We've all looked at them as their opponents. And they want to fight. And that's what they're going to get. They're going to get a fight. And a fight, they're going to get a fight that basically says this. This is an area that believes, right, in the woman's right to choose. This is an area that believes that we take care of our most vulnerable population. This is an area that believes, right, in diversity. It believes in people that, regardless of where they come from or who they praise or who they love, that we're going to stand behind them every step of the way. And this is an area that looks out for one another. That it isn't about the bottom line, it isn't about the numbers, it isn't about the profit. It's how can we help someone move forward, pay it forward, right? That's the type of message that we're going to be pushing forward out there. And I am from Coachella. I'm a homegrown, not a kid anymore, but a homegrown guy, right? Homegrown guy. And I think the stories, that you hear about my colleagues as it relates to our congressmen, our supervisor, some of our Board of Education folks, we're all homegrown. We are vested in this area. We're raising our families and our children here, right? We didn't just come from somewhere else and say, hey, I want to plant myself here and run for office here. Right? We are vested here. And what happens here, right, we are paying very close attention to because we're not going anywhere. And the fact of the matter is that when we take a vote in Sacramento, and I'll close with this, every time we have to push the green button or the red button, I have to think about 2 things. Can I go back home and look at people straight in the eyes and tell them, justify why I voted yes or no, irrespective of what their position may be? And if I can consciously do that, right, if I have the ability to communicate why I took that position, even if people agree or disagree, then that's one box that I can check and say, then I'm voting on what I believe are the principles and the convictions that I believe are in the best interest of our district. And the second thing is it helping the collective effort of the work that everyone else is doing to try to make some progress in our region? And if the answer is yeah, and it ties to the first one, then you know what? I feel very comfortable and confident that when I get back to the district, and when I talk to folks like yourself and up and down the Blythe area of Imperial County, people are going to see from me that this guy's committed, this guy's honest, and he's working his tail off to make sure that our area is representing, that there's a loud voice in the state capitol on behalf of the Coachella Valley. Thank you very much for allowing me to say that.
And we're very proud of you, Assemblymember Garcia.
You deserve this.